Lifestyle design is really that 3-stage process. You identify the elements of your ideal life, who you are, what you really want. You dream big about what the options could be, and then you experiment and take action, and small action leads to big action, which then gives you more information about who you are and what you want, allows you to dream bigger, and then that whole process just continues.
Welcome to the Childfree Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bree and Dr. J, certified financial planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, I have a really cool guest. So about a year ago, I was wandering the hall at FinCon, and I was like, ooh, I know her. That's Jess from the Fioneers. And her husband was kind of poking around. I'm like, ooh, we got to talk. And we started talking, and we were talking about child-free topics and FI. And for those who don't know, financial independence. And like, I was talking about FILE and slow FI. We were talking about like child-free life. I was like, we got to talk on the podcast. I went and joined Jess, I don't know, a couple months ago on her show, different things. So thought we'd bring her here. Now, for those of you that don't know Jess and Corey are kind of like the people behind the Fioneers. She gave me a whole bio, but like she does a little bit of everything. Like I can't sum it all that quick, but like lifestyle design and like she's talking about van life and financial independence and how to actually do it now. They kind of came up with the concept of slow fi. We can have some debates on terms, slow fi, choose fi. There's all different types, but the reason why I have her here is really to talk about like, how do you figure out how to live your life and enjoy it and find that balance between money and life and the child-free spin, because they are child-free. So it's so awesome to have you here, Jess. And for those that aren't watching, Jess is literally coming to us from her van in, was it Lake Tahoe? She's not only one that talks about this topic, like she lives it. So Jess, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here today.
Yeah, so you've been doing this stuff for quite a while. Can you kind of like give us the origin story?
Sure. So originally we started the Fioneers as a blog in 2018, and that was sort of my husband and I thinking about, okay, we want to chronicle our journey to financial independence. And sort of in the early days, I think we thought fire was going to be the thing that we, were pursuing. And my husband actually was the one that got me into it, but he had approached it with specifically the numbers for many years, was like, let's just save 5% more. Let's just save, a little bit more. And I'm like, but why? I don't understand. Right. And at the time, I was a woman, a feminist who was not expecting to have children. The path laid out for me, I thought, was focused on climbing the corporate ladder in my career. And therefore I wanted to have like travel experiences and I wanted to spend money and, all of those things. And then, I got to a point where I was pretty burned out and, was experiencing some pretty severe anxiety and other mental health challenges that I got to a point where I was like, this isn't sustainable. I don't really want to do this. Like for me, it was like a toxic form of feminism to say like, you have to climb the corporate ladder and bring other women up after you. When in reality, I was starting to realize like, no, feminism just means I get to choose what I want to do. Then I became more open to this idea of financial independence, but I was still like, like fire sounds like deprivation, right? It sounds like grinding it out at a job that you hate, for like 10 years so that you can have this full freedom afterward. And I was already in a toxic job and that didn't sound appealing to me. When we started our FI journey, we were saying like, we are going to do things a little bit differently. We coined, our sort of mantra from the very beginning has been, we want the journey to be as remarkable as the destination. And when we actually came up with that before we came up with the name, the Fioneers, and felt like it fit together. And then, about honestly, like a week later, that sort of conviction was really tested because my anxiety and panic attacks like came to a head, and I got to a point where I couldn't work. Like I could not look at my work computer without having a panic attack. And, we had just been like, hey, we're going to pursue fire, but we're going to do it in our own way. And then realized like, oh, I need to take, some significant time off of work to recover and really form a whole new mindset and perspective. And that was, I would say, so that was 2018, and that was where I would say started this like lifestyle design focused journey.
Yeah, I want to pull back a little bit. So a lot of times with the child free community, we get like, well, you don't have kids, so you have to have like this giant career, or you have to like achieve this great thing to. And I'm like, no, you can just enjoy your life. My wife and I were having this discussion recently. She's found a job, really enjoys, doesn't really have a ladder, doesn't have like she was in the academic world, so it was a kind of defined ladder before, but now she's not. She's like, can I just really enjoy what I do and enjoy life? I'm like, yes. And that's okay, but it's so foreign. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's, I think, exactly how I felt, because I was starting to, so this was my early 30s, and I was starting to, I don't know, sort of see like I'm being treated different. As a woman, I'm being treated differently in the workplace. I have to work harder. I can't push back. I have to sort of hedge my opinions, right? All of those things. And even if I do everything right, I'm still taking a longer time to get promoted because of XYZ thing, right? And so I'm seeing like my spouse and my male friends, their careers are taking off, and all of my female friends are like, is this even worth it? Like, I want to have kids, so my husband has the more established career at this point, so like I'm going to be the one that's doing most of the childcare and and I need the flexible job and stuff like that. And so I'm seeing that, and then I'm saying, but I'm not having kids. Right. And so like, what do I do? And so that then got me to the point where I was like, I'm working twice as hard. I'm getting this next promotion. And I got that next promotion, and literally 2 weeks later had my mental breakdown. And like, so it wasn't worth it. And it sort of got me to the point, like I lament sometimes that I needed to get to that point to like understand that like I didn't need to live my life in that way. And that's part of the reason why I'm so vocal about it now, because I don't want other people to have to get to that place before they decide like it's actually okay to enjoy life, and like you can create your own definition of success that has absolutely nothing to do with the career ladder and your salary and upward mobility.
This is my current like debating things. I'm not even sure I even love the word success, or you got to hit your goals. Like you could just enjoy life. That is, I guess that technically is a success, but like we don't have to have a measure for it. And we don't have to be, struggling. I meet with clients a lot and like, oh, well, I've got this job that I've gone up the ladder and I've done well. And I'm like, cool. You make six figures, you're doing well. And I'm like, so for six figures, you want to be miserable. And they're like, well, I didn't say that, but that's really what you're talking about. Like, like you've done, you rang the bell. You actually did what you're supposed to, the good boy, good girl thing. And now it's like, why? Is that fair? Or
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And actually, so going back on what you were saying about success, I do feel, I actually like the term success. And I feel like I've redefined success and ambition in my own life. And part of it was, so Stephanie O'Connell has her Ambition Chronicle, which I really appreciate. And I wrote something for her at one point, and she was like such a helpful editor to help me pull out like being ambitious wasn't the issue. It was climbing the wrong ladder. Right. And the fact that the ladder is my own the ladder I want is my own definition of success, which I've defined for myself as I am crystal clear on what I value, and I have time, energy, and resources to focus on those things. right? And so for me, so it's very broad, right? There's no number. I can't quantify it, right? It's much more of a feeling of, do I know what I value and am I living in accordance with those things?
Yeah, and I think where I'm pushing back on the success thing is because we use the term success, the term failure is the opposite. And I'm going, it's not that clear. Okay. Like in life, there's always kind of like, I'm on I like your journey before destination, kind of like I'm on the journey. If I don't do it at the right speed, I'm not a failure. And I think we're just wired that it's like, it's a dichotomy of success, failure. And we call the child from your life crisis. You hit your personal, professional, financial goals. And you're like, now what? And a lot of people just go to another set of goals, which is awesome. If that works for you, awesome. But also you can just enjoy it. And I think it's just, we're not wired that way. So if you're going to use the term success, are you measuring your success? Or is it just kind of like a feel?
I would say it's more of a feel. And and it is something that I reflect on a regular basis. So I am looking at, I would say probably I'm reflecting on like goals specifically on a monthly basis, but on like probably twice a year, so like mid-year and end of year, I'm doing a full reflection of like, how does my life feel? What is my life vision? And like, where am I not yet living in alignment with my life vision? And how can I move toward that?
And how do you balance that with your husband's vision in life? Because I mean, one of the challenges is a
Mm-hmm.
couple, so we embrace what we call the garden of the rose. We're taking turns on it. But like, how do you find like, well, I want this, my spouse wants that. Like, because like success to me might be failure to my wife or vice. I don't know.
That's interesting. Um, I feel like in general, we like often want similar things, or there are ways to both like achieve what we want in like a win-win way. Right? So it's not necessarily, and so like sure, my vision right earlier on was like, hey, my vision is I would love to be location independent and travel for as long as I want to and have that level of freedom and flexibility to not be tied to a particular location. And at the time, my husband was enjoying his job and very interested in continuing to work for a couple more years. And so we did some experiments. So we rented a camper van and we traveled. And I had more freedom and flexibility at that time than he did. So when my parents would go places, I would travel with them, right? Well, even if he wasn't able to join me. And then at one point then we built out our own camper van, and then we're like, okay, what's the maximum amount of time that he could take off at once while still working in his job without like having an official sabbatical or something. So we did like a 3-week thing. And then eventually he sort of got fed up with the work that he was doing and decided to quit and become an entrepreneur and join me in the Fioneers, which then gave us the ability to be fully location independent. But I would say like it didn't necessarily feel like it was in tension, right, at the time, that it was like, sure, there were like, sure, I would like to be location independent and traveling more. He also would like to be doing that, but also he was enjoying his work at the time. So it was a like, how do we create a plan that incorporates both of what we want? And we did, and it's interesting. We actually sat down and we created like different versions of a 5-year plan where I had like my ideal on one side and he had his like ideal on the other, right? Or like sort of the extreme views, I guess, of them. Like my extreme view was like, he should just quit immediately. And his was like, I want to work for 5 more years, right? And then we actually created like two plans that were sort of like in some ways compromises, but we actually were both like more excited about those like two interim plans, right? If that makes sense. And then we did end up with the like kind of more aggressive of the interim plan. I don't know. I feel like there's ways to work through it and talk through it and figure out how to create a win-win scenario.
Yeah, I think there are times where you can do the win-win. I think there are times where taking turns or, working on, hey, my goal for a while, your goal for a while, like that is still a win-win. It just might not be at the same time. And that's the hard part. I was working with a couple the other day and we use the term file, financial business delivery. It's very slow file, very similar. But really I was trying to get away from the RE part, the retire early part. But I really had a couple that was, one wanted to retire early, like tomorrow, and the other one was going to work for the rest of their life, but just cut back. So that's more the file. And we got in the discussion, and the one that wanted to retire was like, well, I don't know if I'll feel guilty if I'm not working and you are. And I was like, well, if you enjoy not working and they enjoy working, you're okay. Like, yeah, we might have to do our travel plans different or, timing, but that's okay because it's about what you enjoy. In neither case, it was, hey, I'm going to go keep working the corporate job forever and, everything you just talked about. But it's hard when you talk about a couple of like, all right, we're all going to do this. And, you two did the hardcore, let's get in a van and travel. I don't know, man. Me and my wife in a small van. I'm not sure if we can make that work. We're going to do the boat life. It's very similar to van life, but just a little bigger space. But like, it doesn't have to be that extreme, but you can find a way as a couple to both be happy and not making huge sacrifice each other. And I think, unfortunately, as a society, often we see kind of like almost martyrdom that one person has to give it up. And you're probably right. It's usually a lot the case of the woman. I mean, let's be honest of this. Like for my wife and I, we moved for her job 1,200 miles away. And people are like, you're moving for your wife's job? I'm like, yeah, of course. Why not? And they're like, that's not the way that's supposed to work. I'm like, why not? Like, it just blew my brain. But I think it doesn't always have to be this like, you got to sacrifice yourself so the other person can get their dream. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In our process, I feel like it's been, and I actually have been thinking about the like gardener and rose metaphor because in some ways, right, it's like we've both been that at different periods of time or for different reasons, right? And so then like when I took a 6-month medical leave, I think Corey was the gardener and I was the rose at that time. So he was like, I'm taking care of stuff so that you can do, what it is that you want to. And then for a good period of time, I then was working part-time, starting my business on the side, like became a full-time entrepreneur, right? And he was still working, right? And in some ways that was really helpful to support our family and my mindset as I was building the business, that it was like, I don't have to generate tons of income right away. I can build my business in the way that I want. Right. And then it shifted. Let me go back. But then also at the same time, he was excited and interested in building his career. I had more time. So in some ways, I was the gardener because I, during that time, was taking care of more of the household labor, right? Because I had more time and I was working from home full time and, had a ton of flexibility. So I could do things like take the car to the repair shop or like take the dog to the vet, stuff like that, right? In some ways, we were like both the gardener for different reasons during that period of time. And then, right, we sort of flipped. Corey quit his job and took a 9-month sabbatical. So at that point, he was the rose, I was the gardener. But also, though, in some ways, he was the gardener because he was then doing a lot more of the household labor so that I could focus on building and growing the business that I was doing. So yeah, it is interesting to think about that analogy as sometimes you can be both a gardener and a rose at the same time for different parts of life.
Yeah, and I think where I'm going with the gardener and the rose, I just like the role clarity. You handle this, I handle this. This you're growing here. We're whatever that means. And for each couple, it's different, And it's amazing how many times it'll be like, okay, so and so is going to be the rose, and then we get close to it, and no, we switched. And I'm like, all right, it doesn't matter, but we have that clarity in where we're going in life. We're here on the Childfree Wealth Podcast, so I got to ask, so how did being child free impact all this? Because that is part of your story. Do you think you would have been able to do this with kids? How does that all fit?
It's a great question. I do feel like there are people who have built location independent lifestyles with kids. or have thing like what we're doing for a period of time. So for example, Heidi Dusek, who runs the Ordinary Sherpa podcast, she just got back from like 18 months traveling in an RV all around the country and through Canada with her whole family. So husband, 3 kids, and a dog. There are more barriers for people with families to think about, right? Like they needed to figure out what they were going to do for schooling, and they needed to find an RV that fit 5 people and a dog comfortably. And we've talked about how like she needed to really make sure that all 5 people in her family were on board with doing this thing, right? Whereas like it's a little simpler when you only have 2 people, right? And so for us, I think being child free enables this, one partially because one, we have more time, right? And we've had more time to do things like building up businesses on the side and right, that sort of thing. So we have more time. We aren't paying for kids, right? And so we have more of the money that's actually going toward retirement and our short-term and medium-term goals, as well as like there's only 2 of us needed to make a decision about things. I think there's definitely been there's a lot more freedom and flexibility that has come because of this decision to be child free.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say one's easier or harder. It's just it is. I got your website and your bio, and I'm looking, and it says you call yourself a lifestyle design coach. What does that mean? And like, how do we start with that? Like, what's lifestyle design, and how does that work? I mean, if you're just, what is that?
Yeah. So lifestyle design is an iterative process where you are aligning your actions, right, with your values and what you love to do. In the practice that I run, I bring groups of people through a process, a lifestyle design process. Basically, what that means is I've looked at like what do the best designers in the world, how did they approach design, right? And they approach it in a process called design thinking, right? And this process of design thinking is iterative, right? You figure out what are the needs and challenges and assumptions of, the in design case, the user, right? In lifestyle design, we are the ones that we're sort of figuring out to dream big and create like different crazy ideas that are outside of the box, and then to experiment and prototype those things to learn from, right? And so that's what a sort of design thinking process looks like. And so I apply that to our lifestyle in a 3-stage process. So the first stage is identify the elements of your ideal life. And I think of that as it's your what, your why, and your how. So what do you absolutely love to do, right? What's is really enjoyable? What are you passionate about? Your why is what are your core motivations, right? So it's not necessarily just, what's the impact that you want to have on the world. It's also, I'm really motivated by adventure and deep relationships and sustainability, right? And all of those kinds of things. Like, what are the things that drive you? And then the last component is the how. And I think sometimes this is the hardest piece. It's the conditions that you need to thrive. So how you actually carry out the what and the why in a way that feels really good. And I think this is a piece that most of us like disregard, and I certainly did for a really long time. But figuring out like what are the ways in which I can do my best work and be my best self and like really thrive. And so that's the what, the why, and the how. Okay. So I take people through a number of different activities to help generate those things. And then we use that as a launching point to dream big, right? And to say, what are all of the different like activities and ideas and ways that you could carry out these things that you have articulated. And so for me, one of the things, so when I went through this process initially, one of my dreaming big like life plans was I'm going to be a nomadic slow traveler who runs retreats in beautiful places around the world about lifestyle design. Right. And to me at the time, it was like I was bringing different things together and I was like, that feels like such a pie in the sky idea. And I did this as a group. And I remember being in this group and these other women with me saying, like, why? Like, you could totally do that. Like, what could you do to actually get started on doing that? Okay, so I'll finish the story on that in a second. So that was the big idea. And then you say, okay, what are all the questions that I have about this? And then move into an experimentation stage, right? And so this is where you're saying, okay, here's the questions that I have. How can I answer these questions using experiments, right? A conversation, going and actually observing something, or shrinking it down and doing a beta test. So something that you can do in like a day or a couple weeks or, something like that. So you can learn and build your confidence. And so for me on this big idea of nomadic travel and running retreats all around the world, some of the experimentation then was, okay, and we talked about this earlier on the nomadic travel piece. It was, okay, we're in the middle of COVID. What's the way to do this? We rented the van, right? Absolutely loved it. We're like, oh, in one of our other plans, we're like, maybe we'll rent a van for a month and then we'll decide if we want to build one out. And we rented that first van and we're like, we absolutely love this. Like, it was way better than we expected. And so we decided to just go for it, get our own van, build it out, all of that. On the retreats piece, right, that was something that I dreamed up in 2019. Immediately COVID hit. And I was like, how could I start to experiment with this though? And so before COVID hit, I actually did a workshop for my local Childfree group. And I was like, ooh, people came. I enjoyed the process, so I learned those two things from it. And then when COVID hit, I started to do some online workshops and then started my coaching program. And then, sort of got to a point where when it was safe for people to come together in larger groups again, actually ran my first retreat after going and to other retreats and other events and, that kind of thing. And so right. And then that gives me more information, right? So lifestyle design is really that 3-stage process. You identify the elements of your ideal life, who you are, what you really want. You dream big about what the options could be. And then you experiment and take action, and small action leads to big action, which then gives you more information about who you are and what you want, allows you to dream bigger, and then that whole process just continues.
And let's be honest, that's a lot of work and it's a lot of deep thought and all that. I mean, I have a lot of folks, I'll ask them kind of, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they're like, I don't know. Nobody's ever asked me. What do you want the next 40 years of life? I don't know. And I think the challenge is, you had mentioned this earlier, you wanted to prevent people from having to hit rock bottom essentially, or, hit that hard point. But I struggle with, if we're going to say to somebody, hey, we're going to do this lifestyle design, we're going to work on this, you almost have to be struggling somewhere to then be willing to do the work to change it. It's kind of really hard if you're kind of just living life and you're kind of just I'm fine. I'm not broken. Nothing's really high, low. It's really hard to get people to go, yeah, but you could have more joy. You could have more. I mean, have you figured out that one? I mean, I'm struggling with it, so I'm just trying to steal ideas from you.
I think, I do think it depends on the person. When I'm working with clients, I would say probably, I would say, I'm struggling to come up with proportions. So I would say a good percentage of the people that I work with feel like they are on the path toward burnout. And if they don't make changes, then they are going to get to that rock bottom point, right? So that's sort of one profile of people that I work with, is I sense that this is not headed in the direction that I want. Another profile here's people who have hit that rock bottom and have gone to therapy, done the work to sort of get back to a good baseline. And now they're saying, what's next? Right? I'm ready to look forward now rather than just figuring out how to cope with my life. But then there is a group of people who are proactive and forward thinkers, who are saying, like, I'm not in a toxic job. I actually really like what I do. And I foresee these changes in my life coming up, or, I have this nagging sense that like things could be better. Like I had one client that, he was working for a Fortune 500 company as a software engineer. And he was like, my work's an 8, but he wanted summers off and he wanted to be able to be an entrepreneur so that he would have more time with his young kids and family, right? And so for him, it wasn't a sort of rock bottom moment or headed toward there, right? It was I'm in a place that's good. It's like a 7, but I know it can be better. And so there are people who will see, like, they'll be inspired by seeing the experiences of other people and say, like, I realize that even though things are good, I can have more, and things can be better than they are, and they do dive into a process like this.
Yeah, and I think we're really getting to the same point. They're coming to you with a motivation. I don't think you really can motivate people to like improve their life or whatever. We have actually a scale. We kind of go, how simple are your finances on one side and how amazing your life is on the other side. And they'll be like, oh, my life's an 8 or 9 out of 10. They're like, it's good. I'm like, okay, what does it take you to get to a 10? What's that next? And it's like, I don't know that's worth it. And it's like, or by the way, what's a different scale? You're an 8 out of 10 now in this life. What's that next life look like? And how do you, it's just that motivation piece. And I don't know. I've come to the conclusion if they don't have it, you can't give it to them.
I think that the only thing that we can really do is share stories to be able to inspire people to say, like, this is what's possible. Here's the things that we've done. Here are the things that we're seeing other people do. Here's the ways that people are designing their lives. And then I think we can encourage people to think through, well, what if something changes? Because your life might be an 8 out of 10 right now. So for example, my husband Corey at that point was really enjoying his work, right? It was probably an 8 or 9 out of 10. And then things changed, right? There were a number of people who left the organization. There was a new strategic plan that he wasn't super aligned with. He was starting to experience burnout, and it was no longer that, right? It became a 4, or it became a lot lower. And encouraging people also to think about, like, what ideas and sort of plans, and maybe not plans, but like, what ideas do you have that you could explore? And can you start exploring those things that could get you to a 10 out of 10 lifestyle if something radically changes in your work and it isn't what you want it to be anymore? Because that's the reality. Like, stuff can be really great one day and then something can change and it can be really not the next.
Yeah, life always has a different plan than we do. Like weird things happen and you get thrown for a loop. A lot of great thoughts there. I saw on your website you got another summit coming up. Like, how do people find you? Like, if they want to work with you, tell us kind of where to get you.
Yeah, so people can find us on our website, which is thefioneers.com. And we have a YouTube channel. So it's at Fioneers on YouTube. And that's where we're primarily doing content now, is videos and lives on YouTube. And then if people are interested in learning about coaching, or we do a retreat each year for people who are interested in building a like-minded community focused on designing the life you want along the path to Fi, you can find that information on our website. So as I said, the Fioneers. And then one other exciting thing that I recently released, I have a new free 6-day email course focused on limiting beliefs. and sort of identifying and working through limiting beliefs. Because anytime we take steps to do something new and step outside of our comfort zone, limiting beliefs come up. Our brain wants to keep us safe. And so that process will help us. That process will help people, if they sign up for it, work through, okay, what are the limiting beliefs that are coming up for me? And how can I work through them so that I can not let them be barriers that keep me from moving in the direction that I want.
That's fair. And I'm going to get a little meta on you here and go, if you think you don't have any limiting beliefs, that is your first limiting belief that needs to like I've like, oh no, I'm like, okay, that's the first one. Like we got to get past that. So I love that course and all that. So we'll put all that in the show notes. Thanks for joining us, Jess. And where's your next stop on your trip? Like where are we going with the van next?
Yeah, so on Friday, we're actually headed over to the Napa Sonoma Valley in California and gonna do some winery visits.
It sounds like that life you imagined. I mean, we're doing the travel, we're doing the retreats, the summits. Like, I mean, we'll have to check back in like 5 years and go, okay, what's your next life design or next life plan?
And actually, hopefully tomorrow in Tahoe, we're going to go visit a potential retreat location for future years. So all exciting things.
I'm kind of a little jealous of all that travel, but at some points I'm also not, so it's a matter of finding a life that fits you.
Yes,
but
for sure.
Thanks for joining us, Jess.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Follow Childfree Wealth on social media or email us at podcast@childfreewealth.com. If you're interested in working together, learn more by visiting our website, www.childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.